In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger.
I will repeat with the greatest regret, two priests who were with President Kennedy say he has died of bullet.
Died, gunshot wound in the brain.
Slow it down.
And who believe that the President of the United States should be the honorary chairman of a great fraternal organization and confine himself to ceremonial functions. That is what the Constitution says.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I have no other details regarding the assassination of the President.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
You know, one would think that the Kennedy assassination subject, a subject which we are very familiar with here at the Soul Trap, would have been and has been worked over to the point of no return. As soon as you hear the Kennedy assassination, the Kennedy conspiracy, anything Kennedy, you think, oh my goodness, here we go again. It has been worked to the point of no return, and maybe in some ways it has. But there's a very interesting author with a very interesting book by the name of Michael Hoffman. And in his book, The Twilight Language, he has a take on the Kennedy assassination and many other things that I think is worth taking a look at and worth pursuing, at least trying to connect the dots, especially from a Soul Trap point of view. What he says, in essence, is that the Kennedy assassination is more of an occult event than it is a political event. That it is more an occult activity that took place in broad daylight than it was a political event that took place in the shadows. And from that particular vantage point, he states and posits in his book, The Twilight Language, that a great many of the things that we see going on that don't seem to make sense in the political, that don't seem to make sense in the geopolitical, do make sense when you plug in and factor in the occult reality of why they're happening. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to have to say that I have studied a great deal about the Kennedy assassination. At the end of our show today, we're going to have pictures of when I was there at the School Book Depository. We took pictures and videos, and I've done a great deal of research on this. And one thing that I am constantly left with is the question, why did it go down the way that it did? In front of me are several books, and we'll have them on the screen at the end for you to be able to look at your own. One of them is by L. Fletcher Prouty, JFK, the CIA, Vietnam, and the Plot to Assassinate John Kennedy. Introduction written by Oliver Stone, a great book. Crossfire, the one that was actually used by Oliver Stone a great deal in the movie that they did on JFK. This is called Crossfire, the plot that killed Kennedy. Great book, tremendous book. Then there is Jim Garrison, who was the DA in New Orleans that actually brought a criminal case in that called On the Trail of Assassins. If you get no other book, you should get this book, a tremendous book by D.A. Garrison. Then, of course, there's Jim Marrs' Ruled by Secrecy that mentions that. A fascinating book here by Michael Sala called Kennedy's Last Stand, Eisenhower, UFO, MJ-12, and the JFK assassination. And then we have Michael Hoffman's first book, Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, and the book that we're talking about today, The Twilight Language. Now, the reason that I mention all that and show those books is because, as I said, you would think that every angle has been covered, every rock has been turned up. And there are a lot of different theories. It was the Cubans, it was the mafia, it was the Russians, it was the inside government, it was all of the above. But I think one of the things that Hoffman brings out, and I'm finding this more and more, is that none of those really make sense apart from an occult factor. In other words, in essence, what you could say is that what happened on that day in Dallas was not just a geopolitical event, it was a spiritual event. And when you look at it in the spiritual terms, in the occult terms, it makes a lot more sense because, quite frankly, the way that it went down does not make sense. Look, there was so much dirt on President Kennedy. There was so much dirt on his father. There was so much dirt on his brother. There were so many different ways to get Kennedy to do what the quote-unquote powers that be wanted him to do. And there were so many other places and ways that had they wanted to take him out, they could have. And the fact of the matter is, they didn't even have to do it in as public a way as they claimed. If they had that much power and that much ability, is it that hard to fake a heart attack, or that hard to fake a plane crash, or that hard to fake any of the above plus? The answer is no. It's very easy to do that.
I know Hillary can do the job.
Hoffman, as I stated, is the author of Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, which outlines his conspiracy theory of a shadow government, or what he calls cryptocracy. Cryptocracy. Now, if you're wondering what cryptocracy means, it simply means the shadow government, also referred to as cryptocracy, secret governments, or invisible governments. It is a family of theories based on the notion that the real and actual political power resides not only or barely with the publicly elected representatives, but with private individuals who are exercising power behind the scenes, beyond the scrutiny of democratic institutions. According to this belief, the Internet writes, the official elected government is subservient to the shadow government, which is the true executive power. Some of the groups proposed by these theories are constituting the shadow government include the central banks, Freemasons, communists, Nazis, the Rothschilds, intelligence agencies, think tanks, organized Jewish cabal, the Vatican, Jesuits, and the list goes on and on. But if you want a picture of what that looks like, all one need do is watch a recent fundraiser for Joe Biden, where he's on the stage and zones out. This man who doesn't even know where he is, what state he's in, nor the state of his undergarments, has to be led off of the stage by Barack Obama, who some have argued is the continuing and active president behind the scenes of the United States of America. You tell me if these videos look like a man who is leading our country.
Members of Congress and Homeland Security Secretary, I'm not sure going to introduce you all the way.
So the question is, and I was sitting around just talking with my wife the other day, Mrs. Soultrap, the question is not whether or not our president is sentient. The question is, who's running the show if he's not? Well, the answer is somebody or something behind the scenes. And Hoffman states that this is a cryptocracy. and that this shadow government gains power through manipulation of symbols and what he calls Twilight Language. Examples of such psychodramas, in Hoffman's view, include the famous and infamous Route 66, which connects various centers of occult significance. Another one is the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, in which Hoffman sees ritualistic elements, and that's what we mentioned at the beginning. In all of the research that I've done, and all the research that I've read, and even being there at Dealey Plaza, the question has always been, why do it the way it was done? If Kennedy was such an existential threat to the powers that be, why bring to light, or even possibly bring to light, the fact that there are powers to be? Why not a heart attack? Why not disgrace? Why not any myriad of different options that they would have had? No, they wanted something that didn't hide them. They wanted something that showed them, that showed their presence, showed their power, not in the light, in the twilight. The theory of Masonic symbolism in the assassination of President Kennedy was first articulated by James Shelby Downward, with whom Hoffman co-authored King Kill 33, which became the inspiration for a song by Marilyn Manson. Manson, whose part or name comes from two main characters that were around in that time. Charles Manson, who many believe was a CIA operative, and Marilyn Monroe, who happened to be dating both Bobby Kennedy and some believe the President of the United States at that time. Hoffman also states that this ruling cabal is slowly revealing the truth through movies, such as They Live and The Matrix, and other forms of symbolic and subliminal communication. And of course, we're aware of that. One of the most interesting ones that has come out recently is Civil War. Talk about predictive programming. On and on and on the list goes. And so Hoffman has appeared on the Alex Jones radio show to discuss his theories and in other venues. In 2002, he gave a lecture at Sandpoint, Idaho. Hoffman analyzed the 9/11 terror attacks in terms of human alchemy and psychological warfare. Now, again, it's interesting because when you look at 9/11, it is a psychological Swiss cheese of the collective mind. What do you mean by that? Well, what I mean is you have to believe that 3 buildings came down at free fall speed, which had never happened before, all in the same identical way, and yet 2 of them were hit by a plane, and they were brought down, designed to withstand a strike from a plane, and building number 7, it comes down without ever hitting by a plane, and you can clearly see the bombs going off on the floors beneath it before it crumbles. Check this video out. Clearly, it is predictive programming. It is the alchemy and the Swiss cheesing. It is psychological warfare at its highest end. Then, of course, we're led to believe that there was a plane that was shot down in Pennsylvania. Let's roll, which was our mantra as we went into Iraq, who had weapons of mass destruction but were never found. And then, of course, there is the Pentagon, where the Pentagon building, where the plane flew into it, but no plane was ever seen. No plane was ever recorded. In a city that is filled with cameras, nobody ever caught on camera nor witnessed the plane flying into the building. And those that did, well, it looked more like a cruise missile. And those that wanted to testify, well, they committed suicide by either cutting their throat or shooting themselves in the back of the head repeatedly with a gun, which is normal.
And may the force be with you.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is the alchemy of the group mind. It is the psychological Swiss cheesing of an entire generation. In a sense, what he's saying, what Hoffman and others are saying, is that what many investigators are now saying is really what the Bible has been saying for 2,000 years, is that in every single event, there is actually something spiritual. As above, so below. In other words, the physical flows from the spiritual. The material is the expression of the immaterial. And just as the Spirit of God moved upon the waters of deep, and just as Lucifer was behind the king of Tyrus, and just as the Antichrist will be indwelt by the spirit of Satan, so the events that we are seeing, though they may have pragmatic and political and geopolitical realities, there is a spiritual, dominant, occult world that is taking place, which is why we were warned, and we repeatedly say over and over and over, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. What we see in the physical has connection to the spiritual world, either coming from it or reflecting back to it. And that is one of the reasons why the Kennedy assassination still lingers in the collective consciousness of the people and in those who investigate the what-ifs of the world. In the American people mind, there is still something more complicated and something that resonates in our mind that says this was not simply a political killing. And the reason why is it was occult in nature. It was a spiritual statement. One may argue it was the setting of the tone for the age of Aquarius. A new reality that the king is dead and the powers that be are darker and deeper and more in control than you could possibly imagine. It may have even been a 20th century public sacrifice. That is the essence of what Hoffman is getting at in this brilliantly written book, Twilight Language. Hoffman notes on page 175 some very interesting things. He states, Americans have yet recovered from the post-traumatic stress brought on by the public slaughter of the president in Dallas. The two major symptoms of which are feeling numb and being afflicted with amnesia. Now, I think that's a very interesting statement that he made because I've thought about that quite a bit. In other words, these events have begun, he posits, to shape the American mind to be numb and to be afflicted with amnesia. Has it ever struck you how quickly we have become numb to the violence and the wickedness that is out there, but how quickly we have amnesia? In other words, there are some things we remember and some things we don't. And the things we don't remember seem to be the things that we should. For instance, the Las Vegas shooting. When's the last time you heard about a memorial about that? There's no memorial there. There's nothing there. We don't revisit that. We don't talk about that. It's just kind of washed away. What about the Boston City bombing? The Boston Marathon bombing? What about the Sandy Hook murder? What about these events, the Parkland shooting? Or what about the shooting in Orlando? It seems to be that just as quickly as these mass shootings come, they fade away very quickly, and that we have a collective amnesia. Now, he submits that that is an ongoing process. He goes on to write, even in an alternative online magazine like Salon, in a long November 2013 article on the JFK assassination, the author did not recall the findings of the U.S. Senate's Church Committee or the investigations and prosecutions initiated by New Orleans DA Jim Garrison. Now, that's fascinating. You can see clips online of the Church Committee and their findings.
We regard the assassination plots as aberrations. The United States must not adopt the tactics of the enemy. Means are as important as ends. Crisis makes it tempting to ignore the wise restraints that make men free. But each time we do so, each time the means we use are wrong, our inner strength, the strength which makes us free, is lessened.
Also clips of Jim Garrison.
On March 1st, 1967, the first arrest has been made in the investigation of the New Orleans District Attorney's Office into the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Arrested this evening in the District Attorney's Office was Clay Shaw, age 54, of 1313 Dauphine Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. Mr. Shaw will be charged with participation in a conspiracy to murder John F. Kennedy. It should be pointed out, however, that the nature of this case is not conducive to an immediate succession of arrests at this time. However, other arrests will be made at a later date. This is District Attorney Jim Garrison's official press release.
But very few people seem to remember either one of these. Why is that? Hoffman writes, what little we do remember about the conspiracy to kill our president leaves us feeling impotent. And don't you feel that more and more? This impotency, this inability to do anything, as if there is this mad rush, this mad flow, this hurtling towards a conclusion that nobody seems to be able to stop. Thousands of seductive delights and websites compete for our gaze. The colossal modern machine that has our daily lives ensconced in personal comfort and submerged 24/7 in internet, TV, movies, video games, stadium sports, and those cathedrals of consumerism called shopping malls allow us little time for deep reflection, but plenty of attention deficit. The machine grinds on, the rat race beckons, the noise accelerates, and there is no end to the confusion, the dystopia, the amnesia, and quite frankly, the numbness that the modern mind feels. Up, work, sleep, vacation, Netflix, that's about the depth of the modern mind, while the world is hurling forward in an occult-like dream. Now, the cryptocracy knows this, Hoffman writes, and actually factors it into its planning for spectacular crimes. From the King killing 33 to Sandy Hook 13, they know there will be some investigations, some doubt about the official story, and a few heroes will step forth to risk their lives to pursue the perpetrators. The cryptocracy counts on the apathy and amnesia which their ritual crimes hypnotically induce. I think that's a powerful line. Listen to what he says. They count on the apathy and the amnesia which these ritual crimes, not political crimes, not socio-ethic crimes, these are ritual crimes designed to induce in the population the blunt effects of what little opposition their unholy enterprise may encounter. I would submit to you that one of the things that is happening is that there is a dumbing down, and I don't even know that that's the word I want to use. It is not a dumbing down, it is a collective brainwashing, a collective beating down of the mind in preparation, I believe, of the coming of the Antichrist. You're not going to have the Antichrist step on the scene and have such shocking events take place, and such global power, such unseen, unfathomable horrors, and the mind not be prepared for it. The mind is being softened, it's being weakened of the collective humanity. And Hoffman believes that the Kennedy killings and many of these other events that we see are ritualistic in nature. Though there may be a political element, though there may be a psychological element, fundamentally there is a spiritual use, a utilitarian spiritual purpose to what is taking place. There are some things that are so connective that it's hard to get away. And he gives us one particular illustration that I think is very interesting. Bear with me as we work through this, but listen to what he says. Talking about the Kennedy assassination, the Dallas Morning News, the Dallas Times-Herald, and the Fort Worth Star-Telegram newspaper all photographed 3 drifters under police or escort near the Texas School Book Depository shortly after the assassination. Now, I've been there. At the end of our show, we're going to show you some of the pictures and videos that we took when we were there. One of the things that's very fascinating is that when you go through, even in the School Book Depository Museum, and when you go online, you can see that immediately upon the shooting and the speeding away of the president's limousine, all attention turns to the grassy knoll. Nobody is running to the school book depository. Nobody's running anywhere else. They're running to the grassy knoll. Everybody went up there because they were aware that that's where at least a predominant number of the shots were coming from. I've stood at the grassy knoll. I've stood exactly where these three hobos were. And even in the Memorial Museum, there is a picture of these three hobos. It was immediately reported. Hoffman goes on to write, these photographs were transmitted nationwide. The men who were pictured in them became known in the public mind as, quote, three hobos, or the three tramps. To this day, these pictures are among the most enduring, iconic images of the assassination. Conspiracy sleuths have focused on attempting to discover the identity of the three men and have actually missed the Masonic symbolism of the image itself. It was James Shelby Downward who first linked the photo of the three men in Dallas to the Masonic legend of the Jews, J-U-W-E-S, the, quote, three unworthy craftsmen. According to media and police accounts, three men were taken off a boxcar in Dallas Railway Yard immediately after President Kennedy was shot. Described as drifters, detained as suspects, and then released a few days later. Dallas police claimed falsely to have lost the records of their arrest as well as their mugshots and fingerprints. What a quote-unquote coincidence that all of the suspects in Dallas on November 22nd, in addition to Oswald, these three were the only ones to get caught in the police dragnet and make a splash in the media. Why was a photograph of three hobos made so prominent? To answer that question, we need to recall that Dealey Plaza was a cult sacred space. Many people don't know that. The fact of the matter is, the site of the first Masonic temple in Dallas was there at Dealey Plaza. Then we must travel back in time to Victorian England, to the, quote, Dealey Plaza of that era. London's Mitre Square, where the horribly mutilated body of Jack the Ripper's victim, Catherine Edowis, was discovered. A portion of Edowis' apron had been torn off, soaked with blood, and placed in a passageway in the square. On the wall above the blood-soaked apron, a message, later interpreted as Masonic, was scrawled in chalk, and here's what it said: "The Jewess are the men that will not be blamed for nothing," quote unquote. Now, only a Freemason or a student of Freemasonry, Hoffman writes, could have written those code words, which is why Sir Charles Warren, Commissioner of the Police, and one of the highest Masons in the land, rushed to the Jack the Ripper murder scene, forbade the police photographer to photograph the wall, and erased the words. Jewess was not a misspelling of the word Jews, which is what some people thought, that Jack the Ripper was either a Jew, was anti-Semite, or was trying to frame the Jews. But it was not a misspelling of J-E-W-S. It was specifically spelled J-U-W-E-S. Why is that? Because Jewess is a Masonic reference to the mythical ruffians, the three unworthy craftsmen. The apprentice masons, Jubala, Jubilo, and Jubalum, the Jewess of Lodge legend, who, it was said, had assassinated Hiram Abif, the architect of King Solomon Temple, which forms part of the basis of Masonic ritual. These three men in Masonic lore were the ones that assassinated this famous Hiram Abif, the architect of the temple. Now you have this particular connection with Jack the Ripper, and then you have that most infinite picture of the three tramps getting off the train in Dealey Plaza, where the Masonic temple is in Dallas, symbolizing to the world in plain day light, or should we say twilight, that this was a Masonic ritual killing. It might be said, Hoffman writes, that the photo of the latter-day Jubala, Jubilo, and Jubalum in Dallas in the wake of the assassination of John F. Kennedy was the signature of the Brotherhood, that it conveyed an esoteric signal above the heads of the majority of Americans What they were saying was, this was our work. It was not the Russians. It was not rogue elements in our government. It was not the Cubans, and it wasn't Mario down the road who was mad because they couldn't run their rum down to Cuba. No. It was their way of saying, this is the cryptocracy. This is the shadow government. This would-be architect of the new age got out of line. And we are showing to the world and all those who are in the know that it is us, we, the cryptocracy, that rule the world. That's why he could not be shamed. That's why he could not just be defeated in an election. That's why he could not just be taken out with a fake heart attack. That's why it had to be a public ritual in a public square with 3 tramps, the Jewish. Why? They were letting the world know, we run the show. So the reality is that the killing of Kennedy has never been solved, and it will never be solved because it is an enigma and a mystery that can never be solved. What was it that was so famously said in the JFK movie?
It's a mystery! It's a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma! The f***ing shooters don't even know, don't you get it?
Even in the movie, it's telling you that this is beyond sleuth. This is beyond facts. This is beyond simply finding who the character is in the CIA. It is ritual. It is occult. It is spiritual. When you look into it deeper and deeper, you just see so many connections. For instance, one initial connection that you might want to check on your own, I'm going to serve it up, but you have to do the work, is there was a movie that came out years ago. I believe it was Oliver Stone. And the movie was Natural Born Killers, a violent movie that explored the heart of darkness. Well, the lead character in that, the lead murderer, was a mass murderer played by Woody Harrelson. Well, without going into too much detail, I would encourage you to do a little bit of research. Hoffman speaks about it on this. While the suspected Kennedy assassin Charles Harrelson was alive and accessible within the U.S. prison system, this writer attempted to interest investigative reporters into interviewing him. We went so far as to meet with his son, actor Woody Harrelson, in California. That's right. The man who played Natural Born Killers, his father was in jail and is suspected to be one of the possible assassins and connected with the assassination of JFK. One of the things that's very interesting is that there's just so many interconnections. Hoffman talks about the witnesses and all of the confusion that went on over and over and over. There was one by the name of Rose Cheramy. On November 20th in Eunice, Louisiana, Rose Cheramy, who had a reputation as a drug addict and had worked for a strip club proprietor Jack Ruby at his Silver Slipper Lounge and Pink Door Club, told Louisiana State Policeman Francis Fruget that 2 men she met at the Silver Slipper planned to assassinate the president when he came to Dallas. Historian James Douglas, in JFK and the Unspeakable, has identified the men as Sergio Smith and Emilio Santa, Cuban exiles who worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. There was also connection with FBI agent Guy Bannister. There was also a connection with a guy by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald, who was believed to be a CIA plant. This particular lady, Rose Cheramy, had detailed and intimate information about many of these interactions between all of them and the connectivity. She was never really able to be interviewed to the fullest detail. The reason why is because she committed suicide. Now, the way that she committed suicide, well, that's an interesting thing. She ran over herself several times in a back alley with a car. After she ran over herself several times with broken bones and a broken neck, she then proceeded to shoot herself 5 times in the back of the head. I think we can all agree that this is a very common form of suicide. Over and over and over, you see these things crop up. But the question always comes back, why? Well, the answer is because I think what you're looking at is what Hoffman is talking about, is what you feel when you're there. What you're about to see are a series of pictures and photographs and videos. And as you look at these videos, you can see and sense that you're almost on an unholy ground. You are looking at something that just does not make sense. Recently, when we were in Dallas, we toured the school book depository, and to be honest with you, it was a very somber place. It was scary, to be quite frank, to realize that years ago, the greatest and most obvious setup outside the crucifixion took place on these hallowed grounds. And as I have mentioned before, one of the things that immediately strikes me is that looking from the window from the supposed sniper's perch, there was simply no reason to wait and take the shot the way that Oswald did. The fact of the matter is, if you look at these videos and pictures, you will find that the shot was taken at the furthest point away. The easiest place to take the shot was at a dead on as it was coming. Now, he would have shot immediately when he turned off of the main drag and onto that turn. The only reason the sniper would have waited was either to give the illusion of being a sniper, or there was a pro and pre-planned strike that triangulated the hitting of Kennedy. In other words, there was a prepped, planned kill zone. Otherwise, a single sniper would have shot straight on as the car turned onto the main drag. And there is also the place itself. Standing there, you can see that it is at a perfect point between high-rise buildings, the grassy knoll, the bridge, all of it. In fact, Kennedy's head in the Zapruder film going back and to the left seems to clearly show that one of the best points of contact to shoot would have been from the drainage area, just to his right and lower. These videos, the pictures, all of it, they all show us that there's something eerie about this place, something strange about it. Now, whatever may have been gleaned from Oswald was lost forever. The fact of the matter is, Jack Ruby, who was a notorious criminal and notorious gangster, was allowed to march right into the police department and literally sacrifice for a second time another human being on national TV. There was someone who came forward, again, another lady by the name of Dorothy Kilgaman. She, Dorothy Kilgaman, wanted to fight the machine, and Hoffman writes about her. Killigan was the only reporter to whom Jack Ruby is believed to have confided during a private interview. Her father, James Killigan, a fearless Catholic journalist for the Hearst newspaper, who investigated the Lynchburg baby kidnapping, his daughter was a tough-as-nails reporter for the New York Journal-American and a panelist on the nationally televised What's My Line CBS game show. She was known for her keen wit and independence. In 1954, she questioned the official story of the bludgeoning slaying of the wife of physician Dr. Samuel Shepard, who was wrongfully convicted of the murder. She has the distinction of being the first nationally prominent reporter to ask questions about a possible Kennedy assassination conspiracy. One source has stated that when, quote, Kennedy was assassinating, Dorothy was devastated. 10 months before, she had taken her young son Kerry on a tour of the White House. To their surprise, Kennedy invited them into the Oval Office and was extraordinarily kind. She went after this story with both arms wide open. She was going to dig into it, and she probably would have come up with the answer. Unfortunately, this aggressive, truth-seeking reporter died at the very young age of 52. She stated that regardless of the consequences, she was never going to identify any of her sources and that she would come to the truth. The problem is she died before. Even after interviewing Ruby with tons and tons of information, hours of information and notes, all of that has been lost. She perished. How did she die? Well, she died of acute poisoning from 3 kinds of fast-acting barbiturates. They laid the blame, many, on the people that were around her. She had never claimed to be suicidal, never claimed to take barbiturates before, and yet she got too close to the truth, and so she as well had to die.
I approve this message.
Anyone that gets too close to the truth has to die, or has to be removed. Jim Garrison tried to fight the machine. Oliver Stone's movie was based on the case that he brought, but to no avail. In fact, Garrison was chewed up and spit out by the actual machine. From the magic bullet to the man in the movie theater with Oswald. Did you know that? There was a man in the movie theater with Oswald. Did you know that there was a man that was reported to have shot the police officer that did not fit the description of Oswald? And why did Oswald go to a movie theater? You just killed the most powerful man in the world and you walked to a movie theater?
It's showtime.
Almost as if it was pre-planned. None of these things make sense, and the list is endless of things that do not make sense. And just when one thinks they have all come out, here comes another little bit of tidbit of information. The JFK Assassination Records 2023 additional document release. The National Archives and Records Administration is processing previously withheld JFK assassination-related records to comply with President Biden's memorandum for the heads of executive departments and agencies on the temporary certification regarding disclosure of information in certain records relating to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. That's a lot. What they're saying is, maybe sometime in the future, we might let you see some of what's there. The NARA worked in concert with agencies to jointly review the remaining redactions in over 3,600 documents. What was in them? Most people don't care, and it really doesn't matter. We are living in a matrix that tells us there are never any other shooters except the one lone shooter who is deadly accurate, though he has never operated a firearm before. That Vegas shooter that did the damage with a bump stock, and by the way, the Supreme Court just said that bump stocks now are not illegal. That Nashville bomber that was a lone nut. The Nashville shooter that was a lone shooter. All the way back to Columbine. And then there's the Jeffrey Epstein killing himself, and Joe Biden got 83 million votes. The list of psychological trauma goes on and on and on, but it just serves to reinforce what the Bible said, that evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. What Hoffman says is that it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it was the CIA or the Cubans. It doesn't matter whether it was the industrial military complex. All of that is surface for the show, sauce for the goose. The reality is, it was the cryptocracy, the shadow government, the shadow people. It was the powers that be, and they had him killed in a way that reminded everybody, we are in charge. Now, I say this very delicately, and I say this very cautiously, but history has a way of coming around. It seems to me that there is a political leader that was once a president and is running for president again, who seems to be outside the norm. A moral man? No. A good man? Questionable. But a man that wants to put America first, that wants to do the best he can, that wants to bring the darkness into the light and drain the swamp, very similar to the way Kennedy wanted to shut the CIA down, the way that Kennedy did not want to get involved in the Vietnam War. Yes, I would submit to you there are a lot of correlations between Kennedy and Trump. Kennedy was taken out in a way that needed to remind the world that the cryptocracy was in control. It was not just a political killing. It was a ritualistic occult killing to remind those that know and those that should know that the darkness and the rulers of darkness are the ones that are in charge. It seems recently everything has been tried. Court cases, shame, Russian collusion, and yet the people continue to vote. They continue to support with one mind and one heart this Kennedy-like man. And it makes you wonder if around the corner another ritualistic, occult message may need to be sent that we are in charge in a public way. Yes, it will create numbness. Yes, it will create amnesia. Yes, it will create confusion. But they want that. They induce that. They desire that because fear is the food of the elite. The Kennedy assassination. Have all the facts come in? Not even close. A world of darkness yet to be brought to light that lives in the twilight. And that is where you and I are living today. And that is where we will be tomorrow. The Twilight Language speaks. Only those who are familiar with the Twilight will hear its voice.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. Finally, whether you are citizens of America or citizens of the world, ask of us here the same high standard of strength and sacrifice which we ask of you. With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking His blessings and His help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own.